From July 2022 to 13 August 2022, several districts in Freetown, Waterloo, Makeni and Kamakwei towns experienced a series of strike actions with civil unrest precipitating a humanitarian crisis affecting the populations. The demonstrations quickly evolved into violence with injuries, deaths, livelihood losses, displacement, disturbance or destruction of businesses and services, aside from other humanitarian consequences on the communities. The demonstrations were attributed to be linked to claims from the population to the government and exacerbated frustrations over the soaring cost of living, with another fuel price inflation in a persisting context of unemployment, economic hardship and injustice. To discuss this further, I'm being joined by the Vice President, Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohamed Julde Jallo. Hello, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining me on the news this evening.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, so what is the government doing to help its citizens cope with this economic hardship?
Yeah, well, first of all, you see the demonstrations that took place, the violent demonstrations. These are not demonstrations that were inspired largely by rising cost of living. These are demonstrations that were inspired by the opposition party. You know, so they has nothing to do with economic hardship, because generally, you know, that they have to look for an umbrella, you know, for an umbrella so it was just used as an umbrella. But beyond that, let me come back to your questions.
Yeah.
You see, when we took over, when we came in 2018, when we came in 2018, we have taken a lot of concrete, positive and progressive policy actions, you know, to improve the well-being of Sierra Leoneans. We started first, let me start first with the social sector, because we realized by 2018, so many Sierra Leoneans we are spending, the out-of-pocket expenditure for health delivery was very high. So many Sierra Leoneans we are spending a huge amount of money to send their kids to primary, secondary school. So many Sierra Leoneans we are spending a huge amount of money, particularly on utilities. So when we came in, His Excellency Dr. Julius Marabio said that campaign on the basis that is going to provide free quality basic education. So we provided basic education for over 2.7 million kids. Today we have about nearly 3 million kids in primary and secondary schools that are not paying school fees, that are not buying textbooks. So we buy teaching and learning material. We have increased enrollment in primary and secondary school over the years. We have dedicated 22% of our budget, which means money that we are designed originally by family members to pay for kids, to buy school textbook, to pay for school, to pay for learning. Those monies now can be saved and be spent on other things. Healthcare. When we came in this country, 2018, the healthcare budget was at 6%. We progressively increased that from 6% to 8% and 8% to 11.3%. What does that mean? It means within the last 4-5 years, we are able to double, triple, quadruple recruitment in the healthcare sector. We employed over 8,000 additional health workers. We are able to spread those human resources across the country. That enables us to deliver infant and maternal health. So that is why in the last 2 years, we were able to reduce maternal mortality in this country by 60%. We topped the record in sub-Saharan Africa. We are able to also reduce infant mortality. So these are some of the things we have been doing in those two areas. When it comes to overall, you know, after COVID, most of the economies, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, plummeted to a very low. So we developed, by the time we were completing our post-COVID recovery program, then the Ukrainian crisis came. So when the Ukrainian crisis came, what you had is essentially increase in energy prices, increase in freight prices, increase in the prices of essential commodities.
So are you saying that the COVID-19 and the Ukraine-Russian crisis is responsible for the rise in the cost of living? Because you actually did say that you've taken positive and progressive actions and have done so much for the population.
No, yeah, it is a factor. It is a big factor, because what you realize during COVID-19, international freight charges went up. So many of those big countries that are exporting countries, particularly for commodities like rice, oil, sugar, wheat, flour, these are the Asian countries. Those countries were blocked. Because they were blocked, people had to look elsewhere for supplies. And those supplies, they came with a very high prices. Of course, then after we are trying to get out of COVID, the Ukrainian crisis came. What does the Ukrainian crisis? It increased freight charges, it increased energy costs, the cost of petroleum product you see also in Nigeria recently. Cost of petroleum prices rose up, the cost of electricity rise up. What I'm saying, for us as a government, we never allowed those effects to be transferred automatically to the population. So we had to move our politics. So we moved our politics from a politics of development to a politics of subsidy. What does that mean? It means we subsidize electricity. We buy electricity, for example, for 14 cents per kilowatt hour. We are selling it for 8 cents for the social sector and 12 cents for businesses. So we are subsidizing electricity. We are also subsidizing petroleum products. We are subsidizing rice. This is a country where no businessman is importing rice and paying a single cent. We are also subsidizing wheat flour. We are subsidizing commodities as a way to reduce the impact of all those high costs that has been generated as a result of COVID and the Ukrainian crisis and the global economy. So we move to a politics of subsidy. These are things we are doing in the hope to reduce the cost of living so that at the end of the day, citizens will not feel the pinch. So government is taking the hit. Because I can tell you, when you look at rice, for example, and petroleum, for example, we have subsidized millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in those two commodities.
All right, sir, you've listed so many things that you've done to alleviate the sufferings of the Sierra Leonean people, you know, and the reforms, the policies that you've actually implemented. So would you say in this case that the actions of the Sierra Leoneans are justified when they carried out acts of public disruptions just to drive home the point that they're making about life being unbearable despite all the reforms and policies?
No, you see, in a democratic space like Sierra Leone, we have ways of engagement. Like, for example, today I engaged the Labour Congress. And the Labour Congress is a routine engagement to discuss matters of national interest. So with the Labour Congress today, we discussed the cost of living. I used the opportunity to brief them on some of the government actions we are taking, particularly in the education sector, in the health sector, in the food production sector, and more importantly, in the public transport sector. And told them about the subsidies we are providing. I also used the opportunity to tell them the institutions we have created as a way to address social vulnerability in this country. For example, the National Social Protection Agency. So I also informed them the intending things that government intend to do. So this is a country where we have framework for dialogue, we have framework for discussion. So nobody can explain that people take to the street on violence, claiming to become ambassadors of rising cost of living. That is unacceptable. This was done by the opposition. These are opposition people that are driving it, because you don't need violence to send home a message that cost of living is high. There are spaces for dialogue. You have the National Parliament, you have the Civil Society and Government Dialogue Forum, you have the Labour Congress. These are channels that are provided, that are democratic space where we can negotiate and discuss rising costs. But when people took to the street and decide to be violent, using the umbrella of high cost of living, that is unacceptable. And I believe it is not done with all good intention. Because I just listed to you, we increased the budget in government in education to 22%. We increased the health budget. We are now investing in food production. We have increased our budget in the agricultural sector. In the next years, our flagship program is food production, because we realize as a government, we are spending about $520 million to import food in this country, of which $240 million alone is on rice. Okay. So we are investing now in food production, national food production, as a way to reduce our dependency on imports, on importing food, so that we can create a national production capacity. All of this, right. We believe that we reduce the cost of commodities that are directly linked to the cost of living.
All right, we do hope that the results from the policies and the reforms that you've actually listed out will start to show in due time. But thank you so much, Vice President, Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohammed Julde Jallo, for joining me on the news.
Thank you very much.